Hi, I'm John and this is your Crash Course in Photography. This video is specifically for people who know very little about photography but want to get started right away with taking pictures. The first things you'll need are about $200 in a camera store near where you live, or failing that, B&H Photo Online or eBay. Now you're going to want to take your $200 and go to the camera store. Ask to see the used cameras. You're going to want to buy a fully mechanical 35mm SLR camera. 35mm refers to the size of the film the camera uses. In this case, each picture taken is 35mm in width, also called small format. I highly recommend looking for the Pentax K1000 because it's highly reliable and compatible with all Pentax lenses, even current ones. You'll also want to buy a compatible 50mm lens, or as close as you can find to 50mm. Now, a fully mechanical camera that only uses a small button battery for its light meter and a 50mm lens should only cost you about $120 to $200. You want to make sure that the camera store or eBay seller guarantees that both the camera and the lens are in good working condition and have at least a 30-day return policy. You will also want to buy two different kinds of film. First, one roll of Kodak Portra Professional Color 36 count 35mm 400 ISO and one roll of Kodak Professional Black and White 36 count 400 ISO. Also, make sure you buy a camera strap to keep your camera safe and hold extra film and a marker. Lastly, make sure to buy an extra button battery for your light sensor. Don't buy anything else. You don't need it. When you get home, make sure the lens is attached to the camera. Do so by lining up the marks on both the camera and the lens and turning the lens clockwise until it clicks into place. The great thing about SLRs is you can use many different types of lenses. SLR stands for Single Lens Reflex, which refers to the fact that one lens is used for both looking through the viewfinder and exposing the film to light. Lenses come in different sizes measured in millimeters. This measurement refers to the focal length of the lens, which is the distance from the front of the lens to the film. The shorter the focal length, the more wide angle the view is. The longer the focal length, the more zoomed in the view is. I've told you to buy a 50mm lens because it's a great middle-of-the-road lens, capable of shooting both landscapes and portraits. The next step is to load the film. First, take the film out of its packaging. Next, open up the back of the camera by pulling up on the rewind knob. Your camera may have a different button for this. Insert the film canister into the left side of the camera and lower the rewind knob slightly to hold it in place. Pull out some of the film and insert the tab into one of the slots in the opposite spool, making sure it goes all the way through. Then use the film advance lever to advance the film once, making sure the small gears are aligned with the holes along the edges of the film. Then close the back of the camera snugly until it clicks, making sure to push down the rewind knob to lock it. This door must be securely locked in order to keep light out, or the entire roll of film will be ruined. You will want to continue advancing the film until the picture counter reaches 1. Go ahead and continue to hit the shutter button every time you advance the film until the picture counter reads 1. Also, make sure the rewind knob is turning every time you advance the film. If it's not, then the film is not advancing and the tab has slipped out of the right side spool. The next step is to adjust the ISO setting, sometimes called the ASA setting on older cameras. On this camera, it is located on the shutter speed knob as an outer ring. Your camera may be different. You lift up this outer ring and turn it, in this case, to 400. ISO stands for International Standards Organization and refers to the light sensitivity of the film. This can range from 50 to 1200 or more. The higher the number, the more sensitive the film is to light. But more sensitivity means lower quality images, and conversely, less sensitivity means higher quality images. 400 ISO is a good middle-of-the-road sensitivity that can be used both outside and indoors. Now you are ready to start taking pictures. There are three main controls that will determine how your picture will turn out. They are the shutter speed, aperture size, and the focus ring. The first is the shutter speed, which controls the amount of light that hits the film, as well as whether motion is blurred or stopped. The shutter itself is located directly in front of the film and is usually made of silk. Don't touch the shutter. When the shutter button is pressed, not only does the shutter open, but a mirror is lifted out of the way. This mirror, as well as a special prism, are what make it possible to see through the lens using the viewfinder. The numbers on the shutter speed dial refer to fractions of a second. For example, 125 means 1/125th of a second. The lower the number means the slower the shutter speed, the more light hits the film, and the more motion is blurred. The higher the number means the faster the shutter speed, the less light hits the film, and the more motion is stopped. The number 1 on the dial represents 1 full second, and the letter B stands for the word bulb. meaning as long as the shutter button is held down, the shutter will stay open. You set the shutter speed to the red X when you have the flash unit attached. The second control is the aperture, which controls the size of the iris in the lens and thus how much light falls into the film. The aperture also controls the depth of field. The depth of field refers to how much of the photograph is in focus. A wide depth of field means most of the objects in the photograph are in focus, and it looks like this. A narrow depth of field means only one part of the photograph is in focus, and it looks like this. The numbers on the aperture ring refer to the ratio of aperture size over focal length. These numbers are referred to as f-stops. For example, f22 is really the ratio 1/22 or 1/22, where 1 is the aperture size and 22 is the focal length. What this means is that as the number on the aperture ring gets bigger, the aperture itself gets smaller, and vice versa. You can create a wide depth of field in your photo by making the aperture iris smaller, putting more things in focus. You can create a narrow depth of field in your photo by making the aperture iris bigger, putting fewer things in focus. The third control is the focus ring, located in front of the aperture ring. Turning this ring allows you to bring your subject into focus. The effect of these controls can be seen by the two indicators in the viewfinder, the light meter and the focusing glass. The light meter on older cameras is usually represented as a needle moving up and down as you adjust the shutter speed and aperture size. Your camera may be different. You must remember that the light meter is reading the average amount of light in the frame, and that normally you want to try to get the needle in the middle for the correct exposure. But if your picture will contain both dark and bright areas, you will have to slightly overexpose to reveal details in dark areas, or slightly underexpose to reveal detail in brighter areas. At the center of the viewfinder there should be a circle. This is the focusing glass. Place the circle over what you are trying to focus on and adjust the focus ring until you can clearly see the object in focus within this small circle. As for composing your photograph, I can give you 2 rules of thumb. The first is to check your entire frame in the viewfinder to make sure it does not contain anything you don't want it to. Do this by scanning the edges of your frame before taking every photograph. The second tip to follow is the rule of thirds. It has been discovered that when you place your subject at one of these 4 points, it makes your photo more aesthetically pleasing. Once your film runs out, you will need to rewind it. You do this by lifting up the lever on the rewind knob and pushing the rewind release button on the bottom of the camera. Place your ear to the back of the camera as you rewind so you can hear when the film tab comes out of its slot. Once you hear that sound, you know it's safe to open the back of the camera by lifting the rewind knob. You can take your film anywhere to be developed. If you have a scanner that can scan 35mm film, then you can save some money by only paying for the development of the film and not ordering any prints. Although you should keep in mind that prints will last much longer than any file format you currently use on your computer. The last piece of advice I can give you is to practice, practice, practice. Not just repetitive practice, but the kind that will challenge you to do something new and different. If you're really interested in learning more about photography, I suggest taking an Intro to Photography course at your local community college. Now, I'm sure I've missed something, but keep in mind this is a crash course in photography. Good shooting.